Scientists will copy the effects of a huge volcanic eruption to block the sun's rays and fight global warming in a $2.3 million study funded by Bill Gates. Hi, I'm Jim Lee from ClimateViewer News at ClimateViewer.com with facts minus fear porn, and we're going to break down David Keith's sun dimming experiment coming in spring of 2019. I've had a lot of questions about this, so let's really get through the details, the history, and how we came to this point. I'm going to be breaking off a lot of information really quickly, so pay attention. This will be recorded. You may need to watch it twice, but that'll be twice as nice. Understand that everything on my website is free of charge, open source. You're free to copy it, put it on your website, just provide a link back. All I ask is that you support my work on patreon.com/climateviewer or a one-time donation on PayPal or GoFundMe. That would be greatly appreciated, and Super Chat is always appreciated. So David Keith is one of the top 2 geoengineers on the planet, the other being Ken Caldera, although he seems to be, lurking into the background lately. But David Keith is going full force with this thing, and it's been a long time coming. As we can see, this is dated March 2017. U.S. scientists launch world's biggest solar geoengineering study. I'll start dropping links in chat. Let's see if that's working tonight. God bless them. And the original article from the Daily Mail, I'll drop that as well. Without the Facebook click ID. Evil Facebook. There we go. What's up, Phil? Can you hear me? Everything fine? Everything cracking in chat? I'm hearing a Jim. Anyway. Moving right along. So David Keith has had a long, history of pushing various ideas for geoengineering, from aluminum to other metals, sulfur, diamond dust, and, the list goes on and on. So we're going to break down what his latest shenanigans are and where they come from and how it's all rooted with Bill Gates and the like. So let's get into those details right now. Before we do, just want to mention, if you guys didn't catch it, I was just recently on FreemanTV.com, Controlling the Climate Changers with Jim Lee. Great interview over there. You guys might want to check that out. We really got into some deep stuff. Error, try again. There we go with the freaking chat not wanting me to give out links. I hate this chat sometimes, I swear to God. 1 second, let me pop it out and see if it wants to behave a little better. And let's try now. Error, try again. For YouTube, why do you hate me so much? So YouTube doesn't want me to give you that link apparently. Link. Nope, it's not gonna let me do it. Just pure evil. And I was also on Quite Frankly's podcast just a couple days ago. This is December 11th. Here comes the airplane. Starts at about 27 minutes. Excellent interview. We kind of covered what we're going to cover today. I hope you guys will be able to check that out. Oh, I can link to YouTube though. Just wrong. Let's try the other one more time to see if it lets us this time. Maybe it's just acting stupid. Nope. No Freeman TV link. Oh, the censorship is so horrible. Regardless, you guys go to FreemanTV.com and check him out. You'll find it. It's in his list. But great interview over there. So, real quickly, before we get to the story, the reason why you haven't had a video all week is I've been real busy working on weathermodificationhistory.com, and I got this dead sexy new timeline. As you can see, it's a new masonry style, isotope, talking JavaScript. But regardless, you can actually sort by type. So pluviculture, the old days of rainmaking, cloud seeding. Click on geoengineering. It'll bring up only geoengineering related articles. Space weather, doped jet fuel, cloud ionization, things like that. Chemtrails from space. So I can't wait to get this thing live. I've been working my butt off on it. And the newspaper article section has been updated as well. As you can see here, we're now up to 871 newspaper articles, and you can sort through those by date. So you can go 1940, and it'll take you down to that area, like so. And when you click these now, because a lot of people were complaining that some of these were too big to read, or too small to read, I made it so that you can actually pop them up in a new window. So like if you say this one right here, which is pretty darn large, Tesla's tidal wave to make war impossible, I've uploaded the full-size images now. So instead of them being small images, these are literally, some of these are like 6,000 pixels wide. So you down at the bottom, it says click here to open in a new window to view the full-size image. If you do that, it's going to take you to that, and you can actually see that it's full screen. But if you hit the plus, you'll see the actual full-size image, and you can scroll through it. It's really that big. This is a 1080p monitor, and I'm just scrolling across it. It's absolutely freaking huge images. So no more not being able to read the articles. New stuff, working it into weathermodificationhistory.com, and you'll still be able to flip through them like so. And each one has a link at the bottom to view the full-size image if you have any trouble reading it. So looking forward to making that live, but that's why I haven't had a video out all week long. Just so many cool new things coming to weathermodificationhistory.com. It's been on my back burner, and I finally got around to getting that done. So let's get back to the story. David Keith and his SCoPEx idea. So let me close some of this stuff out, and we'll start right back here at the beginning. So what happened? This all really started at Lawrence Livermore National Labs with Dr. Evil. So can Dr. Evil save the world? A geoengineering tale. This was 1994, and this was Lowell Wood, Roderick Hyde, and Edward Teller, the inventor of the hydrogen bomb. And they basically wrote some papers. That's Lowell Wood right there. He's known as Dr. Evil. And the Asilomar conference we won't get into, but the first paper was called Global Warming and Ice Ages, Prospects for Physics-Based Modulation of Global Change, Teller, Wood, and Hyde. And this was a paper prepared for submittal for the 22nd International Seminar on Planetary Emergencies, 1997. And this is really where it kicked off. They said, hey, this geoengineering would be a good idea. Then they wrote the second paper, and guess who gets added to the list? Long-Range Weather Prediction and Prevention of Climate Catastrophes, a status report. Edward Teller, Ken Caldera. And that's where Ken Caldera comes into the play. He's the guy who basically said, I did a freaking computer model of what Teller, Wood, and Hyde were saying. And you know what? This geoengineering stuff looks pretty good. And this was at the 24th International Seminar on Planetary Emergencies in 99. And then it was followed up. They kicked him out. And back to just Teller, Wood, and Hyde. Active climate stabilization, practical physics-based approaches to prevention of climate change. And this was in 2002. And this article was at the National Academy of Engineering Symposium, Washington, D.C., 2002. So Dr. Evil is behind, and Lawrence Livermore National Lab really kicked off this modern phase of geoengineering that we're seeing today. And a lot of this was as a result of the Mount Pinatubo eruption. So they saw Mount Pinatubo erupt, and they said, oh my God, this volcano just cooled the planet. How the hell did that happen? Oh, well, it shot a whole lot of sulfur into the stratosphere. Maybe we can do that. We could mimic volcanoes and shoot sulfur into the sky, and that would cool the planet. That's the modern push for geoengineering today. So on to our next paper right here. Bill Gates. What does Bill Gates have anything to do with this? Well, Bill Gates, he has this thing called FICER, or the Fund for Innovative Climate and Energy Research. And all your weather are belong to me. So basically, Bill Gates has a money pot that he has for geoengineering research. And what he does is Ken Caldera and David Keith are the people who are in charge of handing out that money. So basically, if you go to the bottom of this article, you can see FICER funded studies, and it'll show you, because I asked Ken Caldera, I was like, hey, why don't you give me a list? And he did. So you can see here's a lot of the studies that were funded by David Keith, and the list goes on and on and on and on for quite a while if you want to dig into that. And it's from Google's geoengineering group, Ken Caldera's forum. So that's where all of this comes from. This article is dated 2013. I was actually debating Ken Caldera and David Keith in their geoengineering forum back in 2011 through 2014 before they finally kicked me out for the Asilomar conference. Quote. Why don't we jump back to that just because it's funny? So at the very top of this, there was the Asilomar International Conference on Climate Intervention Technologies in 2010. And they said, in other words, if the public comes to see geoengineering, as one attendee put it, a crazy idea cooked up by rich Anglo-Saxons to dominate the climate, then we will all be rightfully tarred and feathered. As for the U.S. Department of Defense, forget about it. To this group, such involvement prompts nightmares of a new military-industrial geoengineering complex. Whoa, right? So that's really where we're at. Basically, there was like a public screening kind of, what does the public think of geoengineering? And they came back resoundingly saying that people are against the idea of geoengineering. And in Ken Caldera's geoengineering group, he said, well, I take offense to the way the questions were framed in the poll. And if they were framed a different way, I think we would have got a different outcome. And I said to him, Stephen Mercer, appreciate you, bro. Appreciate you. Thank you, bro. What I said to him was, if you have to reframe the question to get the answer that you want, then you're not actually looking for, honest opinions from the public. You're trying to do perception management. You're trying to, control the narrative. You're trying to make people think what they don't. Because when you ask the question honestly, people said, no, we don't want geoengineering. I said, so I'll be there with the tar and feathers. And then they kicked me out of the group. And, even in personal emails to him afterwards, I said, look, dude, you know where that quote comes from. It was from the Asilomar conference. But whatever. I know your butt hurt because I busted you on, Anyway, we'll move along. So Bill Gates is funding all this stuff. And to prove it, Bill Gates had his own idea. That's the wrong one right here. It's called the Stratoshield. Now this is a little older also. You can see 2013, 10. The Stratoshield hose to the sky could reverse global warming. And I put comma, not. Introducing the Stratoshield, later to be renamed the Stratocruiser. I edited that recently. Let's watch a little bit of that. Is it too long? No, it isn't. One sec, I don't have audio on that. Let me fix that real quick. I don't know why where's my properties at? Device. And there, and okay, let's see if it works now.
Rescuing the Arctic. According to computer models of the global climate, an unchecked doubling of carbon dioxide levels from their levels in pre-industrial times will cause the Arctic sea ice to melt more each summer and to retreat farther to the north. Sea ice in the Arctic Ocean at the end of September. The pink area shows the Arctic ice at pre-industrial levels. The blue area shows reduced ice cap due to a doubling of carbon dioxide. This computer model shows the difference in ice cap projected over 70 years. Arctic ice is dramatically reduced with many harmful effects to our environment. We may need options to buy time to complete our move to a more sustainable energy system. The Stratoshield, an intellectual venture's invention. Atomizers deliver a fine mist of aerosolized sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere. Positioned on a very long hose supported by large aerodynamic helium balloons, this hose to the sky could reach altitudes 18 miles high. Particles released here would fall back to Earth over a course of a year or more. While they remain in the atmosphere, they act as a shield reflecting a tiny bit of sunlight before it gets a chance to warm the Earth. This is the edge of space, 3 times as high as commercial airplanes fly. The Stratoshield's hose need not be much bigger than an ordinary garden hose, but must be constructed to withstand high pressure from the pumps and be kept light as possible. Balloons are placed at intervals along the hose to distribute the load. A Stratoshield could be deployed for as little as tens of millions of dollars, a tiny fraction of other systems. A single hose could pump 100,000 metric tons per year of liquid sulfur dioxide up into the stratosphere. A single deployment operated year-round could be enough to save the Arctic from runaway warming. Warming caused by carbon dioxide doubling compared to Stratoshield reductions. Temperature decrease if a shield is operating at 60 degrees north latitude. These computer models show a side-by-side comparison of the Arctic sea levels at the end of September for 70 years. On the left, you can see dramatic reductions in the ice cap. On the right, the ice caps are restored to pre-industrial levels. This model shows the year-round comparison of Arctic sea ice levels. The pink area illustrates pre-industrial levels. With a doubling of carbon dioxide, the white and blue areas indicate projected levels with and without the Stratoshield in effect. These models indicate that a 10% reduction in sunlight over latitudes north of 60 degrees would restore the Arctic ice cap to its former extent each summer.
Okay, I think you get the point. So that's boring as hell past that point, but you get the idea that basically, this is the Stratoshield. Now, where did this come from? It came from Intellectual Ventures. And Intellectual Ventures is a spin-off from Microsoft and Nathan Myhrvold, aka the world's patent troll. So Intellectual Ventures had this thing called the Stratoshield white paper, and I made this picture from some of their literature back when I was on resonated.com. It's quite old, but regardless, this is the exact same thing that David Keith is proposing today. So there's your history lesson on this, and watch how quickly and how closely they are named. Strato Shield meet the Strato Cruiser. So this is David Keith's Strato Cruiser Geoengineering SRM Field Test or Experiment, as one debunker raised hell with me about on Twitter today. But basically, David Keith has now taken the Strato Shield and renamed it the Strato Cruiser. It is still the exact same idea. A balloon floats something up into the sky and sprays chemicals. So to give everybody an idea of scale, you can hop on ClimateViewer 3D, and I have a thing called the atmosphere of the Earth. It's in the history and science, geoscience, and oceanography section, and you'll see it right here, the atmosphere of the Earth. I'll give you guys a link to that right here. You'll need to click the 3D thing to actually see it. But to give you guys an idea of where we're talking about, this is the atmosphere of the Earth going all the way up to the International Space Station, the Hubble Space Station, and the Terra satellite, like we were watching on Mike Morales' videos earlier. That's way up there. This is 600 kilometers. International Space Station, about 330 kilometers. And then we go all the way down here. Polar mesospheric clouds are in this region of the mesosphere. Top of the mesosphere is 85 kilometers. Top of the stratosphere is 50 kilometers. So we're talking in this area right about here. This is the stratosphere. In the stratosphere, we can see is the ozone layer, nacreous clouds. The highest weather balloons can fly to about 18 kilometers. The highest ever was 53 kilometers. So that's your weather balloons. And of course, airplane traffic. Oh God, I zoomed. Oh my God. Let's zoom out and go back. All right, come on back over here. I zoomed too far. So let's do this. The top of Mount Everest is right here. Average human right there. Contrails about right here, or chemtrails, pick your poison. And the top of the troposphere is 12 kilometers. So they're talking about spraying from 12 kilometers to about 50 kilometers in this area right here. Oh, by the way, you just saw a round Earth. Let's go down here to the size of a human, and let's look off in the distance. Take that, flat earthers. Looks mighty flat to me, even though we all just saw I am clearly on a round freaking ball. But unless you realize the size and scale of the planet, you're not going to make a lot of sense of this. And even at flight altitude, it still looks flat. So that's just because the Earth is pretty damn big. But we won't get into a flat Earth discussion today. Barely a curve, even at this zoom. But regardless. So David Keith's Strato Cruiser, or SCoPEx, is the name of the actual program. And it's called the Stratospheric Controlled Perturbation Experiment, SCoPEx. One second. Let's do this real quick. I'm going to go down here to the bottom and grab something real fast. And I think this is the one. Yep. Coming down here. There's SCoPEx and Pfizer. And the Marine Cloud Brightening Project, Haida Salmon, Strato Shield, and the Spice Project. So, all right. Before any of this was the Spice Project. And you can see this. This is on one of my most viewed articles. The Stratospheric Particle Injection for Climate Engineering, SPICE, project was pretty much the same idea, except they had a boat that was going to tug a line that had a sprayer right about here attached to a balloon, and it was going to do the same thing. So this was quite some years ago. Political backlash as geoengineering begins. Let's see if any of these are still alive. They delete everything. This is dated 2011. So if you go and you check that out, you'll realize that basically it goes like this. SPICE project was canceled because of public outrage led by the ETC group. More on that in just a bit. But it's the same idea as the Strato Shield and David Keith's Strato Cruiser. So his Strato Cruiser looks like this. The Strato Cruiser Flight System. And instead of being tethered to the ground, they're just going to let this balloon carry it on up. And it's going to spray out chemicals. Now, first off, the very first test, they were going to be spraying water vapor. And then later, he said they were going to experiment with calcium and finally with sulfur. But this is going to be the world's first out-in-your-face test of geoengineering. And there's already been a lot of pushback on this. They have a page devoted specifically to it right here. This is the Koich group, research group at Harvard University, SCoPEx, where they have their FAQ. So if you want to know more about the project itself directly from them, you can read that. And of course, they make light of a lot of this stuff. What is the experiment? What materials will be released? Initially, it'll release ice, frozen water. Make sure the instrumentation works properly. Later, we plan to release calcium carbonate, a common mineral dust. We may also release other materials such as sulfur or sulfates in response to evolving scientific interests. But that's the ultimate goal. And, is the material dangerous? Are there other risks? They go through all that sort of stuff. Will SCoPEx test geoengineering itself? This is an experiment, not a test. Everybody in the scientific community just plays word games. It's an experiment, not a test. Not a geoengineering test, just an experiment. Nothing to see here. But anyway, a test could make sense later. Oh, Lord, you're killing me. Who's providing the funding? Experimental hardware and operations will be funded by internal Harvard research funds provided by two professors, David Keith and Frank Koich. Additional research funding is provided by Harvard's Solar Geoengineering Research Program. All donations to Solar Geoengineering Research Program are philanthropic. Let's dig a little deeper into that, because they actually aren't telling you the whole story there. So where's my link? I know I'll put it in here. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire. So, helping hands or hubris? Link. Their funding will come from Harvard internal funds, likely Harvard Solar Geoengineering Program, which has raised money from Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates. What did I tell you? So it's Bill Gates' Pfizer money. Bill Gates invented the Strato Shield. They renamed it the Strato Cruiser. And also the Hewlett Foundation, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, and other philanthropists. So SCoPEx will follow in the wake of several other solar geoengineering collaborations that have failed to pick up momentum, such as the 2011 E-Peace experiment, or Eastern Pacific Emitted Aerosol Climate Engineering Experiment, out of the University of California, San Diego, and the SPICE collaboration in the UK, which stalled in 2012. So E-Peace is very similar to SCoPEx in that they don't say that it is a geoengineering test. It just is research that is related to geoengineering and could be used for geoengineering in the future. Baha is what I say to that. So on that note, let's talk a little bit about why this is a bad thing. So I recently uploaded this video, and a lot of people have been very confused about why I did, and this is from Alan Robach. And it's called Stratospheric Sulfur Geoengineering Benefits and Risks. And this was from the weather modification conference I went to. And you can see it right here. Joint Session 37, Climate Engineering and Inadvertent Weather Modification. Right there in the middle of it is Stratospheric Sulfur Geoengineering Benefits and Risks by Alan Robach. And there's the recorded presentation. I uploaded it to YouTube. And I'm going to call Alan Robach, try to get an interview with him. But regardless, let's talk about his video. This is freaking hilarious.
So I went to the first meeting on geoengineering at NASA Ames, and this issue of Rolling Stone came out that week, and across the top, it's got our two favorite people there, but across the top, Dr. Evil's plan to stop global warming. And inside...
Just so we remember, I already showed you the Dr. Evil's plan to save the world. That article by Jeff Goodall was deleted from Rolling Stone. Why? Because the geoengineers approached Jeff Goodall, wooed him, and I actually saw Jeff Goodall at a geoengineering conference saying, maybe this isn't such a bad idea. And I was repeatedly slapping myself in the head going, how the hell did they turn this guy? If you read the article, Can Dr. Evil Save the World? You'll know why. Because it was very damning of, geoengineering. In fact, let's do a quick refresher on one of the things that was said in there that you just can't get over. Can Dr. Evil Save the World? A geoengineering tale. I added that part at the end. This is straight from Dr. Evil himself. Human beings are like cockroaches, Wood said in his typical black humor. It's fairly easy to kill the first 10% of the population. And if you try really hard, you might even get the next 10%. But no matter what you do, you'll never get the last 10%. We will find a way to survive. That's Dr. Evil. Back to the video.
There was an article about Lowell Wood, who used to work with Edward Teller, saying, oh, we can control the climate. I'm a physicist. I'm smart. I know what to do. And I went to this meeting for 2 days at NASA Ames, and the room was too hot, and they couldn't control the temperature of the room, but they were talking about controlling the temperature of the planet.
They couldn't control the temperature of the room they were having the geoengineering meeting in, but they want to control the temperature of the planet. I mean... Thank you, Alan Robach. That is freaking comedy. Oh my God, that's comedy.
And there's these physicists and engineers thought, oh, this is a really cool problem. I started writing down reasons why I thought maybe it wasn't such a good idea. And I got up to 20, and I published a paper, 20 Reasons Why Geoengineering May Be a Bad Idea. And since then, I've looked at it more, and my latest paper has this list of 27 reasons for concern or risks.
So let's talk about those 27 reasons. And this is the priceless part of this display. On the left-hand side, he has reasons to geoengineer, 6. On the other side, on the right-hand side, 27 reasons why geoengineering is a bad idea. Reasons it's a good idea. It could reduce surface air temperatures, which could reduce and reverse negative impacts of global warming, including floods, droughts, stronger storms, sea ice melting, and sea level rise. It could increase plant productivity. Hey, everybody loves plants. It could increase terrestrial CO2 sink, meaning suck CO2 out of the sky and put it in the ocean, which would lead to ocean acidification. Number 4, beautiful red and yellow sunsets. I can't believe he even listed that. Number 5, unexpected benefits. That's not even a benefit. That's just a guess. Well, something else good might happen. So really, he's only got 3 things there, and they're in red. And number 6, prospective implementation could increase drive for mitigation, meaning if we geoengineer, it might scare the hell out of people into actually cleaning up their act. Which is kind of interesting because, Edward Teller invented the hydrogen bomb as the weapon to never be used. So it's interesting to me that this current push for geoengineering comes from Edward Teller and Dr. Evil Lowell Wood at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. And Edward Teller, created a weapon that was so powerful that he said it's the weapon that should never be used. Then he went on to create geoengineering. Is it the weapon that should never be used? Is that what Alan Robach is talking about when he says that the prospect of implementation could increase drive for mitigation? That it's so damn scary that people will clean up their act and we won't ever really do this geoengineering stuff? I highly doubt it. Over on the other side, though, the bad side, the side I tend to focus on because it's a much lengthier list. Number 1, drought in Africa and Asia. Whenever you inject sulfur into the sky, just like with volcanoes, it dries up Africa and Asia. In fact, it'll dry up the entire southern hemisphere. Perturb ecology and more diffuse radiation. So because less sunlight, it's going to screw with ecology. Ozone depletion. Oh my God, it's going to burn a hole in the ozone layer. That's a bad thing. Continued ocean acidification, already mentioned that, may not stop ice sheets from melting. Why? Because the chemtrails everybody complains about, the contrail-induced cirrus clouds, trap heat and melt the poles anyway. So there you go. Impacts on tropospheric chemistry. That's where we live. That's the air you breathe. All of that stuff they put up there will come down. You're going to breathe it. It will kill people. David Keith is on record saying, yes, it'll probably kill tens of thousands of people. But, those are estimates. I don't like estimates. People are stupid. Rapid warming if stopped. So rapid warming if stopped is called the termination effect or termination shock. A guy named Seth Baum wrote a paper called The Double Catastrophe Theory. Let me see if I can find that real quick. And here we go. Let's bring that over here real quick. The double catastrophe, intermittent and stratospheric geoengineering induced by societal collapse. I'll drop that one in chat for you. That was just off the cuff. What's up, Mike? What's up, Vance? J.H. Armstrong? Everybody in chat. Trying to go as quickly as possible. Got a lot to cover. We're already at 39 minutes. Oh my God. So much information, so little time. But this double catastrophe is basically the idea that we have climate change. We start stratospheric aerosol injections. Stratospheric aerosol injection intermittency, double catastrophe, social collapse. Stratospheric aerosol injection intermittency, double catastrophe. So what is it? What are they talking about? Say we were to start geoengineering and then have World War III. Well, then we'd have to stop. Or say we start doing geoengineering on a worldwide scale like David Keith and company are talking about, and then we have a bunch of volcanoes go off. That's a double catastrophe. So that's termination shock. That's a bad thing. I need to put that in my little bookmarks. Keep that handy. So rapid warming, if stopped, bad thing. Human impacts, less solar electricity generation. When I spoke at the EPA hearing on flight pollution in 2015, that's one of the main reasons I mentioned, is that if planes keep making clouds, that solar industry has no chance of ever getting off the ground. So how can we clean up our act with fossil fuels if you guys have a plan to block out the sun and planes are already blocking out the sun? Ponder that. Degrade passive solar heating, effects on airplanes flying in the stratosphere. Oh yeah, it'll cause something called the Wigner effect. Degrading metal, and then you'll have even more metal in the sky. Effects on electrical properties of the atmosphere, which in turn will affect your nervous system and your brain. That's a bad thing. Affects satellite remote sensing. It's going to be pretty hard to look at the satellite images when the entire sky is blocked out by a layer of sunscreen. Degrade terrestrial optical astronomy. Ground-based astronomy 2050. That's right. Telescopes worthless by 2050. You can't make this stuff up. So that's what he's talking about there. I also mentioned that at the EPA hearing. Ground-based astronomy could be impossible in 40 years because of pollution from aircraft exhaust trails and climate change, an expert says. You probably have not heard this, but I want my daughters to be able to grow up in a world where they can see the stars, and that's kind of important to me. And my daughters, and you. Bookmark that too. Just pulling these from my head. So degrade terrestrial optical astronomy. More sunburn. We all want more sunburn. Environmental impact of implementation. That's just very broad human impacts. Whiter skies. Guess what? That's already happening too. Let's see right here. Scientists claim contrails accidental geoengineering. And so I did a video on this. And you can see that on my YouTube channel. Scientists claim contrails are accidental geoengineering. And in the links on that, you will see this jewel where airline traffic may help increase ice haze that's brightening U.S. skies. That's already happening. Right there. Link for you on that one. Underneath that, wrong one. Smithsonian Mag. Airplane contrails may be creating accidental geoengineering. Dissipating haze from plane exhaust alters how sunlight reaches the Earth and may be unintentionally affecting our climate. So what Chuck Long from NOAA CRES says specifically is, I'm talking about a subvisual contrail generated haze of ice which we do not classify as a cloud, but gives the blue sky a more whitish tint. So if you look straight up and you see it's blue, and then you look at the horizon and you see that it's white, that's what they're talking about. So while Homeboy is throw that in my bookmarks. While homeboy is talking about, I'm putting all these in my SRM bookmarks just so I keep them in one spot. Whiter skies, already happening. Already happening. Effect stargazing. Just talked about that. Really makes me upset. Unknowns. Human error during implementation. Humans are fallible. We make mistakes. What if we put too much sulfur dioxide in the sky? Or diamond dust? Or calcium carbonate? What if we really screw things up? Well, if you guys have ever seen the movie Snowpiercer, that's exactly what happened. It was pretty bad. Snowpiercer is a movie about the implementation of geoengineering, and it didn't go so well, and it sent the entire world into an ice age, and the only people that are left that are alive on the planet are on this, atomic powered train, and it's, post-apocalyptic frozen world caused by failed climate change experiment. Set in the future, a failed climate change experiment kills all life on the planet except for the lucky few who boarded this Snowpiercer, a train that travels around the globe where a class system emerges. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It starts out with a whole bunch of clips of chemtrails, and God, that's your unexpected consequences. If they pull this off, if they get away with this, it's going to be bad, to say the least. Governance. Cannot stop effects quickly. Commercial control. What if, like, Walmart or Jeff Bezos or Google decides to get in on geoengineering? Imagine how scary that's going to be. Competition over geoengineering. Whose hand is on the thermostat? Russia? China? America? The United Nations? Who would you trust with the thermostat for the entire planet? Me personally, I have trouble trusting my wife with the thermostat in my house. I mean, sometimes she'll go in there and she'll crank it up to 80 degrees, and I'll say, be in here by the computer going, Jesus, am I on a beach? What's going on? And she's like, oh, I turned the heater up. And I was like, how high? She's like, well, I just wanted to warm the house up. I'm like, it's freaking 80 degrees in here now. Anyway, societal disruption, conflict between countries. What if China were to geoengineer and then we had to go to war with them because they were screwing with the entire planet, or vice versa? This is a serious problem or a moral hazard. Conflicts with current treaties like the NMOD Treaty, the Environmental Modification Accountability Act. If you guys haven't heard about that, Jewel, is related to the NMOD, or the Environmental Modification Convention, the weather warfare ban of 1978. So when it says conflicts with current treaties, anything that does long-lasting damage to the climate could be a NMOD violation. In addition, geoengineering was banned at the Convention for Biological Diversity in 2012. And then there's the London Protocol and a whole bunch of other stuff. But regardless, geoengineering's already been banned. And we'll see that right here. So I'll drop that over here. Climate-related geoengineering and biodiversity. This is the actual Convention for Biological Diversity ban on geoengineering, which happened in 2012 at COP10. And they said, quote, that no geoengineering activities that may affect biodiversity take place until there is an adequate scientific basis on which to justify such activities and appropriate consideration of the associated risk of the environment and biodiversity and associated social, economic, and cultural impacts without exception to small-scale scientific research studies that would be conducted in a controlled setting in accordance with Article 3 of the Convention, and only if they are justified by the need to gather specific scientific data and subject to a thorough prior assessment of potential impacts on the environment. So that is how David Keith is getting away with, I didn't even have it up on the screen. That's how David Keith's getting away with his, current, geoengineering test, is it is a small scale test. So it doesn't really violate this ban on geoengineering by the Convention for Biological Diversity. So this is obviously another one to consider. Conflicts with current treaties. Moral hazard. The prospect of it working could reduce drive for mitigation. So if chemtrails and geoengineering really works and it does start to cool the planet, then that will embolden new countries like emerging economies like India and Africa that are starting to put up coal power plants to say, well, screw it, just do more geoengineering. And that's what they've got there. And then ethics at the bottom. Military use of the technology. And that is at the heart of just about everything I do. That's at the heart of the weather warfare ban of 1978. That is why I proposed the Environmental Modification Accountability Act, available at climateviewer.com/nmod, because all of this stuff can be turned into a weapons system. One way or another, bet on that. So in the final one, moral authority, do we have the right to do this? I say no. I think you all would agree. So that's pretty much the whole thing in a nutshell. You guys can continue to watch through, his, presentation. He talks about the GeoMIP, or the Geoengineering Model Intercomparison Project. And what it is several different geoengineering computer models that show what would happen if they were to deploy this on a worldwide scale. The problem is they're not really dealing with what, everybody's really concerned about today. And that is, what they are terming accidental geoengineering with ship tracks and contrails. So if you guys will read this article, I'm sure that you're going to find it fascinating. It's got all the references you could possibly need in it. But basically, it goes like this. MIT, I published this on climatex.mit.edu. It got the most views and most shares of any article ever published on their website. So that was a no-no, and they had to delete it. But regardless, the emissions and the climate change that we're causing with that is already a massive experiment on our world that we don't really know the outcome of. So I don't think we should start another set of experiments and go into geoengineering. I think we should get our act together and reduce our emissions. And that was UN Assistant Secretary Janos Pastor. And guess where he's at now? He is now, and you can't make this up, Senior Fellow Executive Director, Carnegie Climate Geoengineering Governance Initiative. Boy, there's a 180 for you. So he says, I don't think we should start another set of experiments and go into geoengineering, but after he leaves the UN, he's now working for Carnegie Climate Geoengineering Governance Initiative. What is governance initiative? What is this? This is the final piece of the key. So it goes like this. Panelists call for a creation of World Commission to handle solar radiation management. And the reason why is because they need to know how to deal with the dead people. They had this thing called the Integrated Assessment of Geoengineering Proposals, IAGP. And in it, they basically determined exactly what Alan Robach was saying in his, little schematic here, that, it's going to cause drought in Africa and Asia. And another thing that he said,
same climate. Interestingly, when you instantaneously put in SO2, you get an El Nino, and you get a huge warming and drought over the Amazon. So this was a surprise, and this is sort of a robust result that we get from volcanic eruptions too.
The minute you put in sulfur dioxide into the sky, you get an El Nino, and you get drought over the Brazilian rainforest, South America, and Africa. So lots of dead brown people in the southern hemisphere, and it gets wetter in the northern hemisphere. This is what the Integrated Assessment of Geoengineering Proposals has found. This is what GeoMIP has found. This is what volcanoes do naturally. So if you're going to mimic volcanoes, guess what? You're going to dry up the southern hemisphere. So that's why panelists are calling for a world commission to handle solar radiation management, because at the end of the day, they've got to figure out how to deal with the losers. Link back to Ken Caldera's geoengineering group. Solar radiation management, geoengineering, how to deal with the losers, 2/20/2010. And this is PJ Irvine. It is likely that any solar radiation management geoengineering intervention will create winners and losers, and some nations may always be against any intervention whatsoever. Gregory Benford raised the issue of reaching an agreement on the global scale and how problematic it would be. If, for example, the Arctic Council of Nations agreed to initiate a decade-long field trial to cool the Arctic by 1 degree Celsius, how would they deal with complaints from nations who felt that this experiment had induced a negative change in their climate? In any given year, there are floods, droughts, heat waves, etc. But during this field trial, a fraction of these events would be attributed, rightfully or wrongfully, partially or fully, to the intervention. Two questions arise. Could it be determined if any changes in the climate outside of the target area had occurred as a result of the intervention during the 10-year trial? How would aggrieved nations or people seek reparations for perceived negative impacts, scientifically proven or otherwise? So, this is where the rubber hits the road. Dealing with the losers. And by losers, they mean dead people. So, David Keith is going to do a test, an experiment, next year called SCoPEx. It is to test the idea of solar radiation management on a small scale, as not to break the Convention for Biological Diversity's ban on geoengineering, and to gather information so that they can eventually roll out geoengineering on a worldwide scale. Legal, governed geoengineering. Despite the 27 reasons Alan Robach gave not to, they're still going to do it. Why? The fossil fuel industry wants it. The climate science, global warming retards want it. And the military wants it. So they're going to do everything they can to circumvent every law in the books to make this happen one way or another. David Keith will go ahead with his freaking, sun dimming, sky spraying, experiment. And they'll deal with the losers, the dead people in the southern hemisphere that may never see rain again. So if you're looking for a real life depopulation agenda, look no further. It's called Geoengineering Solar Radiation Management using stratospheric aerosol injections. Oh wait, they renamed it twice. Geoengineering was renamed to climate engineering. The DC Geoengineering Group renamed itself to the Forum for Climate Engineering Assessment. One of the guys over there, Dr. Will Burns, actually, stole a portion of my timeline and presented it as his own work back in 2012. Anyway, and so Forum for Climate Engineering Assessment sounded much better than DC Geoengineering Group. And then they realized that geoengineering and climate engineering has the word engineering in it. And anybody who's ever driven a car knows that anything engineered eventually breaks. So they decided that engineering was a bad word and should go. And now they are specifically referring to it as climate intervention. Like the world has a crack habit and we need to do an intervention. So they've even renamed just geoengineering twice, from geoengineering to climate engineering to climate intervention. And David Keith's SCoPEx climate intervention field experiment is the start of something that we don't ever want to start. For my daughters, for your family, for the future generations, this is a road that we should not travel on. This is a slippery slope, and I ain't just talking about roads covered in an ice age slippery slope. This is bad. That's why I've opposed geoengineering stratospheric aerosol injections since 2011. That's why I debated Ken Caldera and his company for 3 to 4 years, face to face in his forum. That's why I've asked them to come on and interview. And I hope that they will, because I'd love to ride their ass about, all of this. But regardless, I propose this solution to all of this called the Environmental Modification Accountability Act. And it's available at climateviewer.com/nmod. And it's to bring transparency and verification to all of this sort of thing. So I actually reached out. It's an act to end atmospheric experimentation without notification, to create an international registry of atmospheric experimentation events where they tell us in advance before they screw with the sky. Right here is the article, and you can see some of the legislation that I've already written up. At least a 48-hour notice prior to atmospheric experimentation. That's for like cloud seeding. For bigger projects, longer period, obviously, and a sensor network to catch people in the act that don't tell us that that's what they're doing. So you can actually see the slideshow here, an idea whose time has come, weather warfare major players, 10 technologies to own the weather today, and I go all the way through this, why we need it. It's very important that we get this because the public has a right to know, and it could even help out with weather and climate prediction models, examine the butterfly effect of hundreds of simultaneous weather modification experiments, and bring accountability for environmental, physical, and monetary loss from both legal and clandestine weather modification activities. If an individual or organization engages in weather modification activities without notifying the registry at least 48 hours before, they may be considered hostile and, based on severity, an NMOD violation. I've done a lot of research on this. I hope that you guys will look through this. Why not ban weather modification altogether? Well, bans don't work. They ban nuclear bombs. They're still shooting them off. Best case, we can build sensors to catch bad actors and get verification. Too big to fail. Weather modification is over a century old. You can see that at weathermodificationhistory.com, and is a multi-billion, I would even say trillion-dollar industry. Now, stock markets and insurance companies bet on the weather and ensure their bets pay off with this technology. Water-strapped states will not give up this technology, and humans ultimately want to control everything any damn way. Transparency is a start. Transparency may result in public outrage or acceptance. We need to start with disclosure. Knowing is half the battle. I hope that you guys will check out my solution. It's much more lengthy than this. It goes on and on to talk about the citizen-powered Earth observing network in your backyard. I hope to build a ClimateViewer sensor that will, use decentralized blockchain and all that to test the rain that's falling in your backyard, to watch the sky, to monitor, things like electromagnetic radiation, take aerosol samples, display them live on a map, real-time sensor map showing, where illegal weather modification is occurring. And that's, my thing. So how it works: require notice with the registry, catch bad guys with sensors, no fear, that's you. I hope that you guys will support my legislation. And, I actually reached out to Ken Caldera and David Keith about this, and here's what they said. Dr. David Keith: I think the public notice makes sense because I think transparency is very important for building trust. I think 48 hours is much too short a period. I think a longer period makes sense to enable public comment on experiments. Obviously, one challenge is to define what constitutes an experiment. I had defined that in graphic detail at the top of the page after our emails. Most sensor networks already have public data access. Happy to lobby for more public access. Yours, David Keith. And Ken Caldera says, my first impression is that you're trying to solve a non-problem. I don't think there are any bad actors who want to engage in experiments that have any potential for producing lasting damage. Furthermore, I think if that such bad actors were to exist and they were attempting to do something at scale, could most easily be found with traditional intelligence techniques, e.g. monitoring of financial transaction, monitoring of communications, satellite observations of ground activities, and that a network of atmospheric monitoring would be a relatively ineffective way to detect such a program. Further, I find the us versus them framing, there's that framing word again. Framing got me kicked out of his group, by the way. It's kind of hilarious. Of your email is a bit disconcerting. Aren't scientists also citizens? Wouldn't we all want more transparency in the conduct of potentially damaging experiments? Also, the devil's in the details. For example, what is an atmospheric experiment? But regardless, he even agreed, wouldn't we all want more transparency in the conduct of potentially damaging experiments? Dr. Renaud de Richter, another geoengineer, I don't oppose NMOD AA at all. In fact, we need it. And Dr. James Roger Fleming, the world's top historian on geoengineering, he went on to say, I think there's a real important role you can play in this. And he was talking to me in this interview right here.
Experiments we wouldn't know till after the fact.
I think there's a real important role you can play in this. And there was a movement to ban atmospheric nuclear testing after Starfish Prime. Part of it was a run-up to fallout balloons.
The limited test ban treaty.
And that was stimulated very much after 62, I think, and 63. And so there was a public outcry, and Astronomer Royal of England got involved, and very prominent people agreed that we were doing things that were beyond our ken. Yeah. And so I think that there's a role to keep this accountability there. I would argue for a longer warning period.
I agree, and I originally started with 30 days, something like that, but Obama tried to regulate the coal industry, and all of it was thrown out because it was too onerous. And I'm trying to get something that can realistically happen. And it's a 3-step solution. State Department, UN Security Council, it's an addendum to NMOD, it's a law. That's pretty simple. All I want to do here is get people like you and scientists who understand the technology, understand the ramifications, and have the weight behind the name to go with.
I don't know about the weight.
They'll listen to you before they'll listen to me, is my point. So,
anyway, so, he went on to say that, this is a necessity. And that's where I'm at. I've done my homework, and I really hope that you guys will look into this. The fight with the airplanes making clouds and the ship tracks is a fight for another day. It's a separate topic, unfortunately, because the entire scientific community wants to call ship tracks and what most people call chemtrails, what they call contrail-induced cirrus clouds, they call that accidental geoengineering. So unless we can deal with this simultaneously and put a stop to it, our kids are going to grow up in a world where they can't see the stars, solar energy is doomed, and some group of technocrats in some back room are going to be controlling the thermostat of the entire planet. So that's why I oppose what David Keith is doing, and that's why I hope that you guys will oppose it as well. I had one last link for you to finish this up, and it's right here. So that's why Hands Off Mother Earth Manifesto, a permanent ban on geoengineering, once again coming from the ETC group. The Emerging Technologies Coalition group, I believe it is. ETC group, they were the ones who stopped the SPICE program. I'm doing it again. They were the ones who stopped the SPICE program. And this time they have targeted David Keith's experiment as well. 110 civil society organizations and popular movements demand an immediate stop to climate geoengineering. Take that, climate engineering. Link in the chat. So this is why it's a serious problem. Original source is geoengineeringmonitor.org, where they have their geoengineering monitor map. If you guys haven't checked this thing out, it's a pretty badass map. It's kind of like ClimateViewer.org, but just only for climate engineering and weather modification activities, biofuels and the like. But they say that they want a ban on geoengineering field experiments and deployment, a stop to all open air experiments, including the SCoPEx project in Tucson, Arizona, which is David Keith's upcoming program, which proposes to inject sulfate particles and other materials in the stratosphere to test their effectiveness at blocking the sun. The ICE 911 project in Alaska, which would scatter millions of tiny glass bubbles over Arctic ice to slow melting and reflect sunlight. The Marine Cloud Brightening Project in Monterey Bay, California, formerly known as the Silver Lining Project, which was part of the E-Peace program, which would inject salt water into clouds to whiten them to reflect sunlight, and the Oceanios Ocean Fertilization Project in Chile. That's where they dump iron into the ocean to fertilize plankton. It's called ocean iron fertilization. Russ George did this back in the day. It was called the Stephen Mercer, appreciate you, bro, man. Thank you, sir. That's why, they put a stop to it before with the SPICE project, and now you've got these 4 major, geoengineering field tests going on, and that's why they're calling for a stop to it. They actually have, and all of their press contact information is down here, the groups that are involved. ETC Group, Sylvia Ribeiro. I've never spoken to her on the phone, but I talked to Jim Thomas and Pat Mooney from ETC Group. We've collaborated in the past. I worked on their World of Geoengineering map, turned it into a fusion table back in the day. And I support their work. They're the only group on the planet who's ever stopped a geoengineering program. So more information on the geoengineering open air experiments. I'll drop those each in here. This is SCoPEx. This is the ICE 911 project. And this is the Marine Cloud Brightening project. And this is the Ocean Iron Fertilization project. These are going on right now as we speak. So there is hope. And there is pushback, and it's coming from Hands Off Mother Earth, you know, the Climate Justice Alliance, Friends of the Earth, Biofuel Watch, and a whole bunch of other, the Indigenous Environmental Network, Viva la Campesina, and a whole bunch of other people, different NGOs around the world that are trying to put a stop to this. Are we going to be lucky enough to pull this off? I don't know. Are we going to be able to stop David Keith's experiment? I don't know. But it's going to take a whole lot of people getting really educated very quickly on this topic if we are to ever put a stop to legalize geoengineering, let alone what's going on with ships and aircraft. And that's a whole nother video for a whole nother time. But I really wanted to break this down for you guys in, you know, with all the details in one video. So those are all the facts that pertain to this upcoming experiment that David Keith has planned. Now you know the history, and knowing is half the battle. Once again, I hope that you guys will continue to support my work. I do, you know, my research as diligently as possible, and I try to provide you guys with the links to the original sources. No fear porn, just the facts. And I don't think you're going to find anybody else doing it like I do it. So please spread this video, hit the like button, subscribe, leave me a comment, you know, tell me what you think about this. Tell me if there's anything I left out. And I would greatly appreciate that as well. I always try to read the comments. I cannot respond to all of them, because I do have 2 daughters that I take care of, and I'm recovering from a thyroid illness. I'm doing everything I can to keep my health in check, and I'm getting better every day. And I think that, you know, you can probably see that. Go back a couple of videos, you'll see I was 139 pounds, and I've made it up to 160 and had 2 perfect blood draws on my thyroid. So I'm doing everything I can to keep my health tip top, so I can continue to bring you guys you know, the best information on this as possible, because, you know, the lives of many millions of people depend on us putting a stop to geoengineering. This kind of thing, you know, has gone on for 100 years, you know, and that's why I created weathermodificationhistory.com. That's why I hope that people will learn the history of weather modification, how far it goes back, and how far we have progressed, because those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. And I really want us to not go into this legalized geoengineering world where some technocrats have control of the thermometer. I want you guys to watch my previous video, the Alan Robach presentation, and look at those 27 reasons why geoengineering is a bad idea. Memorize them. Use them. It's important. So I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. We're at 1 hour and 20 minutes. Boy, I always try to say I'll try to make this a 20 to 30 minute video, but you know, there's too much information to pack into that short a time, and I want to be as thorough as possible, because there are so many people out there giving you just a little bit of facts and then just giving you a smorgasbord of freaking fear porn. And that is not helpful. Those are infotainers, not activists. If we want to do something about this, you need to be an activist. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. So please, guys, take this information and use it. With information comes power, and with power comes great responsibility. So I simply ask that you attack ideas, not people.